over the summer. Some of you have known me a lot longer than that, and some of you know the book in a different way as well. And because everything that's happened with the charity has happened fairly recently, and quite frankly has, in a very, very good way, completely blown me away. I feel like Benedict's brother, because I wrote it 16 years ago, it got published 8 years ago. I feel it's a bit like this book won't lie down. It just won't lie down, and I just happen to be the writer who's written it. For those of you who don't know the story, a lot of you do know the story, but some of you don't. The story in the book, Benedict is a young woman. Thank you. She inherits some money from an uncle, Uncle Erno, and she has no idea why. And he asks her to scatter his ashes from the bridge on the River Kwai in Thailand, but she just doesn't know why. She decides to do it, and she meets her brother. She goes to Thailand, she goes to the River Kwai, she hooks up with her brother, and her brother has become a Buddhist monk. Now, my Uncle Erno was a Japanese prisoner of war. My brother, did I say brother? My uncle was a Japanese prisoner of war. My brother was and still is a Buddhist monk, and he is in Thailand at the moment. So it's fiction, but I never but it is rooted within truth. I never expected this book to have the journey that it's had when I wrote it. I wrote it really for a young audience. I never expected to find out and just to meet this amazing bunch of people who are the Far East prisoners of war. It's been a complete revelation for me. Ken, who was very kindly come this evening to have a chat with me. It turns out that my uncle was captured in Singapore like 90,000 soldiers. He ended up, I thought he was at the River Kwai when I wrote the book. He actually ended up being transported on what's called hell ships, because they were a living hell, to Taiwan. And I've been to Taiwan, but I couldn't find any records at the time. Ken was also held in Taiwan. We've just met this evening.
I have a poem.
You have a poem. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Thank you very much. But also Ken set up the cenotaph in Taiwan, and he goes there every year. So it's just been amazing to meet you. As well as the 90,000 prisoners, there was 20,000 Far East prisoners of war that the Japanese held. Families and children. And I met Margaret earlier, and I think she's joined us again. When she was 8 years old. And yourself as well, was held with her mum and her family by the Japanese for 3.5 years. So it kind of puts a lot of things in perspective. I've learned a lot of this in summer, and I've learned a lot about this little thing we seem to call life. What I'd like to, I'm aware it's very hot in here, but what I'd like to do is do 2 readings for you. Now, I'm used to doing readings, and what I don't want to do is, and the book doesn't hold back from the horrific experiences of what happened, but I'm not going to read too much of that. I'm going to read 2 extracts. One's about Hellfire Pass, which is the bit that most people know about, because there was a famous film about it. And then I'm also going to read a shorter piece, which is one of my favourite passages, because also I think it's important to end on a high note and on a happy note. I am very, very confident that my Uncle Erno and that everybody who died out there, because they died for us, and that's just coming home for me, but everybody who did come home, I'm very, very confident that they wouldn't want us to be unhappy in life. Life's about being happy, and it's very, very important. So I'm going to read a couple of passages.
Tricia, would you like to stand here for that? Would that make it easier for you?
Can I stand my gin on now? It's a joke.
I'll just hold it for you. What else is over here?
Thank you, man. The key thing that I've learned from these amazing people, and this charity is full of lovely, lovely, kind people, and very, very sincere, and very, very, their stories are very, very heartfelt and very moving. What it's taught me over the summer, and when you speak to the veterans, because I'm not from an army family, I never expected to have any, never really expected any of this, but now it's making so much sense to me, because I actually really connect with the idea of my uncle, along with all the soldiers that came home, were told not to talk about it. War is not glorious. No one's glorifying war. And for me as well, this isn't about hating the Japanese. It's not about judging the Japanese, although it's very hard not to. It's hard to take something so horrible. It's hard not to take it personally. But if anything has come out of this whole summer and this book, which doesn't seem to want to lie down, the route out of this, and Benedict tries to find her way out of, trying to understand what on earth this is all about. It is about love. And when it's really, really hard, it's about love that comes from yourself. It's about loving yourself. And even at those times when our fellow human beings, and probably especially at those times when our fellow human beings are being absolutely awful towards us, it's still, if you can find that in your heart, it's still a way forward. So this first reading is probably about 3 minutes long. So what I want you to do is imagine you're in Thailand, you're near the bridge on the River Kwai, it's very, very hot, and Benedict is there. She's been in Thailand for a few months, she's gone to meet her brother, she's fallen out with him, they've had a row. Not about me at all. But she's found herself to the River Kwai, which she knows was where her uncle was a prisoner. It's a tourist. It's an unusually touristy place. She's woken up. She's backpacking. She's got a little hut by the river. She goes up for breakfast, and the Thai guy who runs the backpacking hostel is offering them a trip, a day trip, a sightseeing trip. He wasn't sold on the idea until he told us more about where he would be visiting. He was talking about all the places where Uncle Erno would have been when he was a prisoner. All the time I'd been in Thailand, I'd felt the presence of Uncle Erno close to me, like a benevolent human being watching my every move. It had been because of him that I'd come here and met Anthony again, yet I knew so little about him. The Erno I knew was old, frail, and was even silly. He was always forgetting why he'd phoned, and by the time you'd worked out it was him on the other end of the line, he'd got all flustered and had usually put the phone down. Once, when he rang, I picked the phone up, and all I heard was him saying, "Is that you, Muriel? Is that you, Muriel?" over and over again. I didn't have the heart to explain to him that his wife, Muriel, had passed away. That was the Erno I'd come to know over the last 10 years of his life. I'd heard stories of a different Erno. Dad had told us about him when he was younger, a young, handsome man, strong and virile, with a sharp sense of humour and an eye for the ladies. He was intelligent too. He passed his exams and he was about to start a job as a teacher in the local boys' school before he went to war. God knows what happened to him, Dad explained one evening. He'd come back a wreck, a complete wreck. I learnt over the years that it had been Auntie Muriel who had nursed Erno back to health when he turned up. He'd been presumed dead by the whole family because they'd heard nothing from him for years, even after the war had finished. Everyone had been surprised when he arrived out of the blue, like a ghost. Muriel was able to nurse him physically, but the rest of Erno had long since been left in the faraway jungle of Thailand, sacrificed under the weight of an unforgiving, foreign war machine. There must have been so many like him, I thought, as I listened to Mr. Chu sell us the special priced all-day sightseeing trip, and I realised that I was on the edge of the world that Uncle Erno had never spoken about. While the others squeezed themselves into the cab of Mr. Chu's pickup truck, I sat on a rug with the cushions outside in the back. The other cars in the truck zoomed scarily up to our bumper, inches from our truck, before swerving out to overtake. A teeny motorbike hurtled up beside us, until all I could see was the shaking head of the rider, the flesh on his face pulled back by the force in the air, his hair streaming. He was so close, I could have nicked a cigarette that he was smoking, and I laughed at the sight of a man on a motorbike, smoking. We reached Hellfire Pass, About an hour later, he was approached on foot through the trees and down a pathway which led to a steep set of steps plunging down into the jungle. Once at the bottom, the ground levelled out into an area less than 10 feet wide. The rocks we'd climbed down were on the right, and there was a steep tree-lined valley disappearing into nowhere on our left. You couldn't see where the valley ended. It just descended into a lost mass of trees and undergrowth. It was peaceful, and it was pretty, but as we set off to make our way down the pathway, I felt an icy, dreadful grip take hold around my heart. I was about to walk in Death's dark vale, where a young, strong Erno had once walked before me. It took a while for the impact of where I was to sink in. It seemed so far removed from the tranquil shores of the River Kwai and the stunning sunset that greets us every evening. It was hard to put the two places side by side. Heaven and hell are such unexpected bedfellows. Halfway down, at the centre of the pass, there was a tall, thin tree. It stood, defiant, perfectly vertical, a branchless tree reaching way, way up beyond the sharp edge of the rocks, beyond the other trees that hung from the top of the cliff, and out into the blue sky above the canopy of the forest. It had grown like a beacon of hope, a symbol of triumph, nourished by the men who had fallen there. I stood at the base of the tree, craning my neck to see its leaves, which were high up in the sun above. I needed to be alone. If I'd have believed in God, I'd have prayed. If I'd have been Buddhist, I might have meditated, but I was none of these, and so all I was just still, alone with Uncle Erno, with Mum, with Dad, and the thousands of men who had died here. I think it's just important to own the context of the story. The story is a hopeful one. I'm going to read you a very short reading now, but it's also important to remember why we're here tonight. It's really, what happens when you go around literary festivals and book signings, they're really, really great events, but often the audience forget the idea is please to buy the book. And I said to Mike earlier, we actually don't want you to buy a copy of the book. We don't want you to buy a copy of the book, if that's all right with you. We would love you if you can, and we take all major credit cards, cash, check. We'd love you to buy 5 books, to buy 10 books. Christmas is coming up. Please buy them for your mum, for your dad, your great aunt Edna. Most of all, we want to take this story forward. I never really understood the cenotaph or what all that was about. All these amazing men that I've learned to get to know in your navy blue blazers. I hadn't realised you hadn't chosen to go to war. I forgot that bit. But it really would help the charity if you bought the book. Thank you very much. And I'm going to stay here and hang around all evening to sign them for you. None of these people, through everything that they've been through, would have wanted us to be unhappy. My trip to the Hellfire Pass.
That's all right.
Is that okay? My trip to the Hellfire Pass, the one thing I learned when I left was that I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. But there was one thing I was fairly certain of, is that I personally, like many people my generation, where I live, I'm never going to face war at first hand. It's not going to happen to me, and it never will. And I'm sure those who did face it would want us to be happy. So this is my favourite passage. And just to put you in a setting, you're in Thailand, it's very, very hot, a bit like this room, very humid. It's up near the border with Vietnam and Cambodia in that area. Benedict has left England. She's hooked up with her brother in Thailand. She hasn't seen him for 4 years, so they're getting to know each other. She's landed in a fairly alien place. She's in the Buddhist monastery in the middle of a forest. It's all wooden huts and incense. Men in brown orange robes with shaved heads. And they're walking around the edge of the monastery. And the story is that Buddhist monks, they give up all their worldly possessions, they give up their houses, their women, they give up all their cash, and they are celibate. The story goes that there was one monk, he could do all that, but the one thing he could never give up, and I totally get this, he couldn't give up his motorbike. He couldn't give up his Harley Davidson. Strictly speaking, Buddhist monks aren't supposed to ride Harley Davidson. The rules are, they can't ride elephants, because only kings and queens can ride elephants. But seeing as the rules were written by Buddha about 2,000 years ago, it didn't include Harley Davidson. So there's Anthony, which is Benedict's brother. There's Tikaro. Tikaro is an American Buddhist monk that is with her brother. And there's Benedict. And they're on the edge of this forest. You see, drawled Tikaro, there weren't no Harley D's when the Buddha was around, so there ain't no rules about it. We can't ride no elephant, but hey, a motorbike ain't no elephant. And with that, Anthony opened the doors of a small shed. It was so tucked away in the undergrowth that you barely know it was there. In the darkness, chromed glistening from the sunlight, was the secret behind these two boys' smiles. Is this what I think it is? I asked, disbelieving. It sure is, said Tikaro, beaming. It's the genuine 1938 Harley Davidson soft-tail knucklehead. Ain't she beautiful? Perfect like the day she was born. And it was. It was an enormous, wire-spoked, single-seated dream of a Harley. Its wide, teardrop tank had been lovingly polished. The well-worn leather saddle had been soaked and waxed, and it sat on giant, shiny coil springs. The chunky hallmark V-twin engine gleamed at the heart of this delightful machine, and the ancient chrome footplates stood out boldly to the side. At the front, there was a large, proud, shining headlamp, and the handlebars spread like antlers on the head of this truly wonderful man-made beast. The grey, solid paintwork was immaculate, and the big, fat, pumped-up tyres were just waiting. The man owns 16, explained Anthony as he circled the bike, trailing a finger lovingly across the tank. All different, all Harleys, and he gave them all to the lay people of the monasteries. This one came from a temple about 50 miles away. I caught Anthony's eye as we each recognised the old, familiar joy of anticipation. The American looked at us, and he grinned. All of us knew what was coming next. Anthony was first on the bike, road billowing, engine growling like an old-fired symphony. The bike went like a rattling dream, but a rattlingly good one, and the countryside reverberated to an old, familiar sound that we'd each learned to love. Shake, rattle and roll, chocolate and Mozart. The sound of a hum. Why God invented metal, Tikaro quoted in a love-struck daze as we watched James Dean in an orange robe sail through the dust, waiting for our turn to ride the dream machine. It was as sublime as it was surreal, an hour spent with Buddhist monks, cruising illicitly through golden dust and dirt on a sunny morning in the hazy northeastern tip of Thailand. Thank you. Also hand over to Mike now.
Well, that's it, thank you very much. I just mentioned something very briefly that relates to what we're trying to do, well, will do, shall I say, for the charity, and that is also many, many long times ago, I was treasurer of Age Concern Hampshire. We had a similar sort of thing for another type of project, but it did follow the same format in some way, because what we did was we had this information book,